Hey, welcome to the Star Wars Unlearned podcast. My name is Josiah Shuett, and I'm joined by Nathan Hawley. What we're doing is we're looking at Star Wars from the perspective of its creator. So we're turning off our fan brains and really just trying to uncover the story that Lucas is trying to tell. This is episode 11 in our series on the Phantom Menace, where we explore the filmmaking, the history, the mythology, and everything else that Lucas and his team used to bring this first chapter of the Star Wars saga to life. So join us as we dive in and unlearn what we have learned about the Star Wars story. So we kind of, like last time we talked about all these obstacles that are in front of Anakin, how they keep becoming plain to the audience, so how many obstacles are in the way of this kid actually accomplishing his goal. And so I like in this scene, I like that we have another one that's introduced, which is Sebulba. You know, Watto and Qui-Gon are talking about Watto doesn't really think he's going to win, and Qui-Gon says, why do you think that? It's like, well, I have great faith in the boy, but Sebulba always wins. So not only is Anakin, he's a human, so he's not really made for it. His pod racer has never run before. He just got it running like yesterday. And he's a kid. He's very young. But another obstacle is that he's going to be racing against the champion, like the best pod racers, but also Sebulba, who always wins. At least we're told. And so, yeah. And so it's just, that's a big deal. That's a huge obstacle. It's like taking, I don't know anything about NASCAR. I don't know anything about car racing. I wish I did, but whoever the best racer is, it's like, Dale Earnhardt Jr., that's the last one, the only name I know. Throwing just this rando kid in there. It's like, he'll win. What? Why wouldn't you put your money on the professional who's been doing it for years, or seems like, and especially Sebulba, he's got these, crazy arms, and like he seems like designed and like built to pod race. But we'll see. As again, walking through the story in order, you're like, this is looking worse and worse the closer we get to the race for this kid. But we'll see. Qui-Gon has faith in this kid. We'll see.
That's a good call. Yeah, that's an interesting point to think about, how like the stakes just get higher and higher and higher. And then all the way up to like right before the race where Anakin's like, yeah, I've never even finished a race before.
Yep, that's the next one I have. Yep.
Yeah, I never really thought about it. I was just like worse and worse and worse. Yep. Yeah. That's a good point. I love, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I love the backgrounds in this scene. There's so much to just see. And we've talked about that before, how George is so good about that, just making it such a lived in universe. And it's pretty amazing. And you'll have to tell me, but or correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think this background's CGI, right? I mean, I think these are real props, like all the pod racers, right? In the background there.
Yeah. It's a big old miniature. So like there's obviously the set that Qui-Gon and Jar Jar are walking through, but a lot of blue screen, but what's behind them, most of that hangar is a big miniature that John Knoll and his team worked on. And I guess the characters are either the people walking through it, the scene, are either live action photography in front of a blue screen that they kind of just comped in there, or it's a CG character.
Really? All those all the pods and stuff? It's all like miniature stuff?
I think that all the pods are miniatures because they can't, because they're not moving, so they're stationary, so they don't have to be CG, because they did build miniatures for all the pods, even when they are in motion. Some of the shots of the pods are miniatures.
Gotcha.
When they blow up and stuff a lot of the times. But in this shot, I'm pretty sure I know for sure the hangar is a miniature. I'd have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure the pods are too. There might be an odd one where they changed the design or something and they comped a new CG pod in there just for continuity or something, but I'm pretty sure most of that is a miniature with tiny little CG elements like characters. Anything that's probably moving is either a live action person walking around or like a CG character, like pit droids. Or I don't have this scene in front of me, so I'm not exactly sure. I can't remember exactly what's in that shot. But
yeah, I'm just looking at basically all the pods from all the pod racers and just people working on them, and the welding and stuff like that. It's so cool. It's just this big junk shop almost kind of thing, or a big mechanic shop, it's pretty cool. Yeah, I like it. Boy, and you really see Qui-Gon's confidence here. I mean, he's just all in on this.
Yeah.
Like all in. I'll take that bet, and I'm going to wager my pot against, the boy and his mother. And like, wow,
Yeah.
he is committed. He knows that this is up here. Just putting all his faith in Anakin, which is just kind of an interesting progression just to sort of see him. I don't know if he was skeptical of Anakin. That may not be the right term in the beginning, but just kind of like, what's going on here? Here's this boy. Mm-hmm. And now he's just, the more we see him learn about Anakin, the more he's like, yep, I am in.
Yeah.
It's just to the point where he's betting everything on it.
Yeah. And it's almost like, you almost get the feeling like he doesn't want to back down now. It's like, well, I'm kind of all in. I gotta go for it now. This is like the only best option we have. So he's kind of, I'm not sure to what degree he had to convince himself, but he is, as you say, yeah, he is much more into it now. Like even after we just heard, well, Sebulba always wins, and even after that, Qui-Gon goes, I'm still gonna bet on the boy. He's deliberately chosen Anakin, and now he manipulates the world around him to make sure he can free this kid, because now he's talking about like, I'm pretty sure I want to take this kid with me now and train the Jedi. So that's in his mind now, and so we don't really know that yet. That's his motivation, and this is the scene where he is trying to get Watto to free him. And so he's, he literally gambles on Anakin's life, and he cheats, and of course Obi-Wan wouldn't like this. So it's probably a good thing Obi-Wan's back on the ship. He probably wouldn't approve of this. But yeah, it's just yeah, he's going to the point of where he's like cheating at dice to make sure that Anakin is part of the equation, that Anakin doesn't get left behind. So it's super cool to see how far he's come from, where he gives Anakin that look like, oh, thanks, my young friend. He's like, that kid's kind of cool. And then now it's like, yeah, I'm going to, again, risk the lives of the Naboo people and the Gungans on this kid that I met 2 days ago. It's crazy. Again, as the audience, we're like, you're insane. What's happening? But Qui-Gon, you've lost it, buddy. You're going crazy. Bring back Obi-Wan. He's sane. But this pod race is really kind of their first look at why Qui-Gon's faith in Anakin was justified. We see how he performs, how he wins the race. It's it's a spectacle. It's crazy to see what this kid can do. And we, as an audience, along with Padme and Jar Jar and anyone who maybe doubted him a little bit, are kind of won over. And even Qui-Gon's a little nervous throughout the race. You can kind of see him like breathing a little heavy and like, trust the force. But yeah, so it's really cool to see that there's a little bit of a kind of story arc going on through just the pod race. That's really fun to see and track through.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that's a good point. Like we're kind of, what do you want to say? Living in Padme's shoes at this point, because she's really the voice or the perspective of the audience in the scene. She's like, you've never even finished?
Yep.
And I love the look she gives Qui-Gon.
Yeah, it's great.
Where Qui-Gon's like, oh, of course you will, or whatever, like you'll win this just fine. I'm sure you will. And she just looks at him like, I love that look.
Mouth agape, like, what is happening? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's that next obstacle is that he's never finished a race, like you said. Kidster's right. I will this time. Again, that insane confidence that he has. He doesn't doubt himself. He's
that's
just
right.
this wellspring of confidence. And Qui-Gon, he's like, of course you will. It's like, what do you know? You don't know this. Exactly. And the pod's never had a test. We've started the pod, but we haven't driven it anywhere. So we don't even know how far it's going to go. And if you don't know if it'll go 2 feet. So it's, and Padme's look is just crazy. And of course, that's exactly the look we would give him if we were in her shoes. Yeah.
So we kind of along those lines, I think we talked about this last time, but you have to refresh my memory. When do you think is the point where Qui-Gon knows this is the guy? I don't know if he is ever fully confident he's a chosen one. I mean, maybe he is, but when's that point where he's like, "Yep, I'm in this kid."
I think he kind of goes all in when he gets the midichlorian count from Qui-Gon or from Obi-Wan. Because actually there is that line in the screenplay that isn't in the movie, but I like which I think was taken out probably because it might have been stating it a little too obviously, but when Obi-Wan says the reading's off the chart, it's over 20,000. Qui-Gon says kind of quietly to himself, "That's it then."
Oh yeah, we did talk about that. Yep, I do remember that.
So that is in the movie, and then then he, even Master Yoda and Qui-Gon's like, "Well, no Jedi has." So it moves on from there. But you can kind of see in his eyes there, and I think it's good that it's more understated in the film because you still don't quite know as an audience, but I think that's probably the turning point for Qui-Gon is in that scene. Because he's building more and more confidence. He likes the kid, but it's at that point where he kind of realizes, it's after that scene, which is the night. I'm pretty sure it's the night before this morning, the morning of the race, where he goes, okay, this is the next scene is him saying, I'm going to try and free this kid. Because before that was on the table. Before he was like, I'm afraid I'm not here to free you guys. And after that, it's like, well, this kid can help us on our, get the parts we need. But now he's like, next step, I'm going to take him with me and train him. So.
Okay, that's right. Yep, that makes sense.
Because
you really, and you really feel the switch. I mean, you really feel it. Like the scene compared to the one right before it, where Qui-Gon's like, now he's just like, boom, yep, here we go. That's right. Thank you. I forgot about that. Yep. Nice. Any other thoughts on that before we get to the pod race?
I think the only thing I was going to mention is just this next quick, very, very quick scene, just a couple of shots where, again, ratcheting up the tension, the Sith probes are now in Mos Espa. So time's really running out now. We got to get this, we got to get this race over with. We got to get off this planet before the Sith catch up to us, So just again, just a little bit reminder of the stakes of everything before we get into this really fun pod race sequence. Just a reminder to the audience of the larger picture. Naboo, the fate of Naboo is still at stake here. We never lose, even though we're on a kind of this detour on this random planet. We haven't seen Naboo in a long time. Just a reminder that what could happen if they fail.
And it's such a quick little scene, and that's what's so neat. It's just this, slight little reminder, and it really struck me. Speaking of the Ahsoka series, and this is not to dog on them, but it's just something they're missing from what George used to do. They don't have those in modern Star Wars. Those quick little. Remember, the tension's here, the tension's here, the tension's here. Like I was just watching that series going, wow, then instead they slow way down and they like zoom in on the character and you stay with them for a long time, and they've done it in every single Star Wars movie since Disney bought it. Like I remember the scene in particular that really stood out to me was in Rebels when Obi-Wan fights Darth Maul. Do you remember that one? Mm-hmm. It's just like, it's like 5 minutes of just them changing their stance. And I get why they're doing that. They're trying to build tension and it's trying, but it's just different from what George would do.
Yeah, it is a very different style of filmmaking where you, and George has always been very good at balancing these like multiple storylines, multiple things weaving in and out in the same film, especially towards the finale, right? You have all those, when you get, I think Phantom Menace actually has the most complex. I think there are 4 different storylines because there's Anakin in space, there's the Jedi and Maul, there's Padme and Panaka, and then there's Jar Jar and the Gungans and fighting the Podrace. Yeah, it's 4, I think. So you got 4 storylines interweaving, and Return of the Jedi also has a very complex. I think it has 3 in that one, 3 or 4 also. And so not just the finale, but those are good examples of it where he's constantly cutting back and forth. And it can be hard to, it can be very difficult to tell a story that's sort of has its attention divided like that. To have this planet, distant planet where like people are dying, but you don't really see it, and you're staying with these characters on what seems like a little pit stop in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And still have that work, but he does manage to do it. It's a very, very challenging way to do it, and it's true. It's definitely a style that wasn't really popular when he first started making the movies, and today, it's a little more focused on like multiple storylines. Isn't quite as popular anymore, and so you definitely see that in modern, not just in Star Wars, but in every kind of film, especially for a more general audience. You see a lot of more focused, like we're following one character, one group of people, and we're not really cutting away to different scenes too often. You see a little bit, but that's a good point. It is a very different style. But he liked taking risks. He liked doing things differently. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's very unique to him. I think at most you kind of see what is that called, the A and the B storylines. Where you have A is kind of the main story, and then you have your side character story going on. But even then, I mean, you hardly see A, B, C, and D, kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, it's true.
Like even in the Avengers movies, I mean, there's a little bit of that, like when you get towards the Infinity War or Endgame kind of stuff. But yeah, but George is so known for saying this: faster, more intense, faster, more intense. And I remember reading in that archives book, how was it Doug Chiang who storyboarded out something, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to make this so fast and intense." And I think it was a fight scene on Tatooine with Qui-Gon and Darth Maul. And George looked at it and was like, wow, that's really slow. And he like totally changed it. And Doug was like, wow, I thought I had that super fast. And George just like, boom, 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 Yeah. And I like that because like there's never a dull moment. Like even in New Hope, where a lot of people say, oh, it's kind of outdated, it's kind of slow. It's like, no, it's not. Like it's always moving. It's just always quick, and tension's always rising, and the clock is ticking, and I just think that's super cool. So I love that stuff. This is very George, and that's become really obvious to me as we watch modern Star Wars, because that's just not as prevalent, and that's just been really obvious to me. There's a couple of scenes in Ahsoka where it's like that too, where it's not necessarily bad, but it's not George, Yeah,
it's just a very different style. And I've noticed that that's sort of like Filoni's thing. I remember his first episode on Mandalorian with one where Ahsoka showed up. I remember that episode, all of a sudden things slowed down a lot. He liked to take his time. And I do enjoy that kind of filmmaking, but it was very different from... It's not faster, more intense. It's maybe... sometimes the slowness can kind of create an intensity of its own, like it can build suspense. But the speed is definitely different. I mean, talk about speed. This next scene we're going into is all about speed, right? So that's a good It's good topical transition into
That's right.
This next scene, which is a pod race itself. What do you? This is a fun. I'm sure there's plenty of things to talk about and great memories and just nostalgia for this. What are your thoughts on the pod race?
Oh my goodness, man. I just love it. I know I've said this like the past three podcasts. Like I love this so much. It's so great. I don't even know where to start. I guess first off, just as kind of watching the scene here, I love the miniatures, and how everyone criticizes the prequels like, oh, it was all CGI. But when you do the research, and I think you even mentioned this, there's more miniatures in the prequels than there are in the originals, or more like real model, that kind of stuff. And you see that here, and I love that overhead shot of introducing the arena. And it's this huge thing. And you look at the behind the scenes, and you see that model, and it's like, wow, so cool, And I love the music here. I mean, John Williams. The guy's just a master, but just the way the fanfare, it just rises the excitement. And even the announcers, like that, you could argue that's a very modern thing, but I mean, it fits so well. And you just feel like you're here at game day. It's time, and it's just a fun thing. And what a great idea to have like a two-headed guy, one's in basic, one's in Huttese, and just introducing everything. And I don't know how you describe it other than just the emotion of introducing the pod race is so epic. The music and the crowds and the announcers and all the introductions of each of the racers, I know he kind of expanded on that in a special edition almost, but man, I just love it. You just get so excited, like, oh man, I'm ready. Something big here is about to happen. And like you said, the tension's been building and everything's getting ready, So
I was gonna say George really goes into these. Especially in the prequels, he has these movies within a film within a film kind of idea where he has these sequences. Like in Revenge of the Sith, it's like the first 20 minutes, like rescuing Palpatine, that whole thing where you can tell he gets super into it, super excited, because every time they talk about these sequences and behind the scenes, they're always saying we just had to cut it down. The pod race was like an hour long, or like that. They just become movies in and of themselves. And you're right, like we saw, you can see in like deleted scenes just the introduction of every single pod racer, every single racer, every single pod, and they just really go into detail on everything. And like, what is it? Is it Rats Terrell? Is that his name? One of
Sounds
those.
familiar.
I think, yeah, well, he's one of the racers, and it's like the deleted scenes, like, and here's his family who came to watch, and I think he gets blown up later, and there's like a shot of
Oh
his family
yeah.
crying as they leave the arena. So it's like, little, but just that level of detail making it feel like, oh, you're actually at a race, because Lucas loves cars. He raced a lot when he was younger, and so he knows this world, and he knows what you wanted. You really kind of created that feeling of what it's like to show up on a race day and be there with the crowds and see everything that's going on. And he does this several times throughout Star Wars, but he does this cool mix of, as you said, this kind of modern feel of like the announcers, but also the pod races. It's a chariot race. It's the Ben-Hur chariot race, and he's talked about that. So that's no secret. They're basically chariots with big gigantic jet engines instead of horses, and so he manages to meld those things together. So they're both they're both familiar to us. They're part of our history, part of our real world, but kind of combined in a new way with just enough extra like sci-fi and space opera thrown in that it just becomes its own thing. It becomes its own Star Warsiness, crazy sequence. So I do love the pod race, and of course, it was always one of my favorite parts as a kid. And they knew what they were doing when they made a video game. With Star Wars, Episode 1 Racer or whatever it was.
I love that game.
Yeah, I love playing the pod racer, sequence or level in Lego Star Wars and any other. It was so many fun memories with that. But and also I think it was good as a kid for me, just seeing Anakin race, because it felt like, oh, I could do that. I could. It wasn't just watching like an adult race. It's like what this is more like. Yeah, just you felt more connected to it in that way as a kid, because I felt like he was the underdog clearly, and that he was fighting all these strange monsters and racing all these weird. You get the sense that they're all pretty much adults, and so it was just this kind of cool like victory for a young kid. Like, yeah, we're finally the best at something. We finally beat all the adults that we're actually There's one thing where we're actually the best at it. So that was kind of a fun thing to root for. It was a fun sequence just on that psychological level as a kid. I really enjoyed it, I think.
That's cool.
But there's so much. I have so many notes here about the pod race.
I know. And just while you're looking it up, you see the tension rise even more, where Sebulba comes up and pulls down the little piece of his pod racer and threatens him. And but yet you still see the confidence of Anakin, like Qui-Gon comes up. You ready? He's like, yep. I'm fine. And his mom's like, are you okay? Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. That's part of being a kid, right? Some of that naivete is sort of helpful. Like he doesn't realize how. I mean, it's good. He doesn't realize he's fighting for the fate of a planet.
That's true.
But he also doesn't. Doesn't seem to be aware of how dangerous it actually is, and. He's just kind of like, oh, this is what I'm doing. I'm a kid and I'm having fun. This is I'm just gonna help my friends, and that's a very endearing quality. And it's also just speaks to the sometimes the focus that kids can have that we don't anymore. We can lose that as an adult, where we just get so bogged down in all the details of things and try to we have 7 problems going on in our heads at once, and it's like, well, I can't deal with any of those. Like, I just got to focus on what's in front of me. Being like Qui-Gon says, be in the moment, feel, don't think. Like, that's good advice for a lot of us a lot of the time. So
yeah, and I was going to comment on that, like how, like, even in this little introduction to the pod race, you're kind of taking on a slight emotional roller coaster. Like, here it is, it's the big day, here's the fanfare, here's the anxiety, here's the anxiety in like the good sense, like, man, I'm excited for this day at the races. But then then you get this moment with Jar Jar and the the farting Eopie or something.
Yeah.
It's so great. And then so you're cracking up and you're kind of like, I'm excited, and then you get this threatening Sebulba, and then you're brought right into Qui-Gon, and you have that beautiful Force theme. I love that. It's one of my favorite Star Wars songs. And he's just like, feel, don't think. Are you ready? Like, you get this like cool master and apprentice moment, almost like, it's okay. And man, what an emotional roller coaster, I just love it. It's so cool. It's just so epic, all the buildup, and you get all the emotions. So
Yeah, and it's just everything is so evocative of these different ideas and themes, like this connection between pod racing and slavery, right? It totally makes, again, it's being the Ben-Hur analogy. It's ancient Rome, right? It's this civilization that's, in this case, Tatooine's kind of on the brink of collapse, and so this is what the Outer Rim is already up to. It's only a matter of time before it creeps its way into the heart of the Republic, and unfortunately you find out that it already has begun to do that, and so it's just so that has larger political and social implications. Just the fact that this is happening, this is a thing people do, this dangerous sport, if you're gonna call it that, but but yeah, there's just stuff like this. Just the fact that this is even happening is a clue into the state of the galaxy, the state of the morality of these people, of the beings, and what's being allowed to what think people are letting certain things slide, and how we're just on that kind of tricky the precipice of, again, things about to get really, really bad for the galaxy, and it's no surprise that things end up in war by the next episode, right? When this is how people spend their day. Jabba the Hutt showing up like Caesar, just it's a first look at Jabba. I have notes about that once we get to it, but yeah, just all these creatures are cool. The announcers I love, and one of the great things about reading that illustrated screenplay is that it has the translation for all his Hutties on there.
That's cool.
So you can see everything he says. So if you ever, it's a fun look. It's a fun little deep dive. Like, oh, what does he actually say about Sebulba? What does he say about everything here? And there's some fun little tidbits in there. And I think they may have planned to put subtitles, and maybe they decided not to later. But the translation of the Huttese one, I can't remember which is which. But I think his name is Bede. I can't remember what's the other guy's, Bede and something. Anyway,
the announcers, you mean?
Yeah, it's like Bede and something. I have it right here. I should just pull it up just to get their little nerdy little. What's their name? I
don't know if I've ever learned their name.
Fode, F-O-D-E, Bede, like Fode, and Bede, I think is what it is. So Bede's the one who speaks in Huttese, I'm pretty sure. I don't know, it doesn't matter. But his translation of it, let's see, says that the Boonta Eve Classic is the most hazardous of all pod races. So, and not only is Anakin, just pod racing, he's pod racing like the most difficult track, according to this guy.
There you go, raising the stakes again.
Exactly. And even if he's just exaggerating for the crowd, and he's like, "Oh, it's the most hazardous one," it's still. We'll see. It doesn't look very easy. It looks pretty treacherous. Another thing he says, he identifies Sebulba as the reigning champion and by far the favorite to win. So again, it's like not just Sebulba it's not just Watto who likes Sebulba. It's like everyone is kind of rooting for him, and he is the reigning champion. That wasn't a lie. It's been confirmed. So yeah, it's really real encouraging if you're Anakin.
Yeah.
And then we see, I don't think we knew this up until now, but you see that Anakin is the only human racing that day. And so kind of we talked about before, but yeah, humans, they're not meant for pod racing. He says he's the only one who can do it. They need faster reflexes apparently, but hopefully Qui-Gon was right about Anakin's fast reflexes. And what else I got? Oh yeah, the cheating that you mentioned, that's like another obstacle thrown in his way. Sebulba's, he sabotages and taunts him, and again, he brings up when Anakin's slavery is brought up, Sebulba calls him slave scum or whatever. Sebulba brings it up to bring Anakin down, but Anakin again is like, "Don't call me a slave." Like he gets angry, he reacts like he doesn't like that word. He doesn't like being reminded of the situation he is in, because again, he's a kid. He feels free, and he wants to be. He thinks of himself as being free, and so when anyone who ever reminds him of that, he reacts to it very, very badly. And of course that continues throughout the rest of his life. This conversation between Qui-Gon and Anakin is, it's Qui-Gon's first, he gives Anakin his first introduction or instruction in the Force. It's his first. Anakin's the first time ever learning about the Force, and it's very rudimentary, but it's accurate, and ultimately effective. Anakin follows those instructions, whether he, consciously or not. But he all the way to the end of the film, right when he's fighting on Naboo, he kind of follows that advice. But it is that advice that he kind of forgets as he gets older, and ultimately leads to his downfall, right? Because the other cool. Jedi don't. Maybe aren't willing to give the same attention to that instruction as Qui-Gon was, and particularly in Anakin's case. But feel, don't think, use your instincts, stay in the moment, all that. Anakin starts trusting to visions of the future, and he loses all that stuff. So loses all the good instruction. Like his first instruction was the most important one, and he starts out listening to it, but then he forgets it as he goes on.
Interesting, huh? Wow. I never picked up on that. Huh. Yeah, because that's a big Skywalker thing, is follow your instincts.
Yeah.
Just go with your gut. Huh. Wow, that's cool. I don't remember what I was going to say. Oh, well. Keep going. This is great. I'm just soaking it up. This is fantastic.
As I mentioned before, Jabba the Hutt is the first time seeing him. And we've heard about the Hutts so far. Panaka, I think, was the first person to say, or Qui-Gon controlled by the Hutts, and Panaka's like, well, Hutts are gangsters. We've heard about them. This is our first time seeing them. And it's Jabba in this case. And so Jabba's just visually just a great symbol of excess. He's just huge and fat and enormous, and he's surrounded by his entourage, and it's like he's just another figure of greed, kind of like Watto, and just another creature, person, being that is at home in this really horrible environment. Like in ancient Rome, he's there being the ruler, the boss of the area. He starts the race. He's he's the you can picture him giving the thumbs up or thumbs down at a gladiator fight kind of thing. He's that kind of guy. He's basically just this big fat snake. Is just a greedy dragon, right? He has wealth, and he has slaves, and he hoards all these things. So he's just this great visual symbol of everything that our heroes are fighting against. But
yeah, boy. And when you think of like who on earth could rule this nasty backwater corrupt place, you just can't get better than Jabba.
Yeah.
Big fat worm,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, slow. Yeah. He just is such a good picture of ruler of Tatooine. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's neat. It's kind of neat too, because you see the same slave bikini that Leia will wear. You see that there, a little homage, and you see Bib Fortuna. So a lot of callbacks to Return of the Jedi, which is cool.
Yeah, totally.
And I love the Roman thing. Like when that hit me last time when I was reading through the archive book of like how this is inspired by chariot racing. It's like, wow. This is so Rome. I never even thought about that. You just literally saw a Colosseum a few weeks ago, and it's just so cool to think. Like, I remember when I was in Israel and I saw that a chariot racing Colosseum. It's like, wow. It's just a smaller version of the Podrace, and I never realized that. It's so cool. Like you have the sand court, the stone, just tan colored stadiums, and like, wow, here we go. Yeah, the big fat ruler. The crowds are just loving the violence. Just like, wow, what a Roman picture. I never even thought about that. Totally. Yeah, so perfect. Yeah, so good.
Yeah. And real quick, do you know who plays Bib Fortuna in that scene?
Is it Matthew Wood?
It is. Yep. Good job.
Hey. Yep. Which is the sound designer, right? Or sound. One of the sound designers for Star Wars. Yep.
Yeah. Even to this day. Ben Burt. my next note is about Ben Hur. That's why I said that. Apprentice to Ben Burt, who worked on all the prequels, and now he's since been retired. Now he's in charge of all the sound design. So and the voice of General Grievous and the battle droids, of course.
And he's still playing Bib Fortuna to this day.
That's true. Yeah, as I say, we saw him in Boba Fett. Yeah, where he's kind of slowly turning into Jabba, fat and slovenly himself.
Yeah, but pretty cool.
Anyway, just a quick little thing. I thought I might maybe he doesn't know this, but you're too good.
There's one thing I do know. I do know that one.
But well, as my slip of the tongue kind of indicated, my next note is about Ben-Hur. And have you seen that movie?
I've never seen it. Never seen it.
It's very good. I really enjoy it. It's one of those classic kind of biblical epics movies. But this whole sequence is totally an homage to the chariot race in that film. Pods are chariots with engines, like I said, instead of horses. And it's just even like the kind of certain beats are the same too. Like there's this rival who uses tricks and cheats he cheats his way to win. So like how Sebulba has like he just sabotages everyone's pod, and he has these little what did Anakin say? He flashed me with his vents and that kind of thing. There's a character named Masala and Ben-Hur are the two. It's like Anakin and Sebulba. So Masala is a bad guy. Masala and Sebulba are basically the same character, and so he also has like these like spikes on his wheels that kind of tears up the other people's chariots, and then you have the tyrannical leader who presides over the race. So you have Pontius Pilate and Jabba. So that's kind of his equivalent in that film. And the hero Ben-Hur had been a slave, and he has a special talent for racing. And so the vehicles, and there's also a scene where the vehicles become like entwined and they can't like break free, and the bad guy's vehicle is destroyed, just like Sebulba. So it's like almost like a recreation of that scene. You can tell George is a big fan of that scene. And there's even a scene where the hero like loses control, where like Ben-Hur loses the reins. He has to get him back, like Anakin loses his little engine cable thing. So there's a lot of similarities, and it's just it was really fun watching Ben-Hur. I'm going like, this is the pod race set in Rome. This is really cool. But
wow, that's awesome.
yeah.
And so cool.
What else? Talking about there's other influences just besides the ancient chariot racing. Like we talked about modern day car racing. Like the event is portrayed very much like a modern racing event with announcers and all that. And even a lot of the camera work is akin to the type you'll see in broadcasted races. So it kind of gives the impression of all these cameras like staggered across the track. And we cut to the exact same angle in each lap to let us know where we are on the track. So it helps the audience kind of keep track of where we are. But it's like,
that's cool.
It's like the same camera move. Okay, they're rounding this corner, so this camera on this corner is going to follow them. And the next lap, we do the exact same move, camera move, same position. So you see that in racing a lot, where the cameras are, this is the third turn camera, and so we cut to that angle, and it's the same angle every single lap. So that also kind of gives the impression this is an actual like race track with official cameraman or something kind of.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so George.
But also, it helps, gives the audience continuity, because it's super helpful. This can be an easy thing to lose track of, but it's so helpful that each pod is basically moving left to right the entire race. So there's clearly a forward progression. So it's so easy to get, put the camera on the other side and get different angles, but you kind of lose a sense of geography. The audience can quickly get lost. And so it's really helpful to have that consistency. And if you notice that, pretty much, unless it's the shot of the pod racers happening like straight on, like they're coming right at you, or going straight away from you, it's usually traveling left to right. Very rarely will you see a shot on the other side.
Wow.
But it's
cool.
you only see that if it doesn't mess up the geography and the continuity, because the audience has never seen this track before. They don't know what progress is being made. They don't know, are they getting close or not? So since you don't have that confidence from the audience, you kind of have to build that in by just keeping your camera work very consistent. And George is very, very good at that. And this scene, I think, is a really good example of that.
That's so cool. Boy, never even thought about that. And again, just the art of storytelling through video, through picture, that's so cool. Because there's like hardly any dialogue in the pod race. It's so visual. And it's, wow, that's so cool. And George is so good about that, where he films almost documentary style. We've talked about that, and that just adds more to that. Like, we're gonna film this like a real life race. It just throws you into it. That's so cool.
Totally.
Brilliant.
And he, and he also talks about specifically this scene. Let me just pull it up, because I think I have it written down here. he talks about silent filmmaking, and where, like you said, it's mostly just visual. And he loves just doing kind of visual tone poems, as he says. But here's this quote from him. He says, "I like racing. I love the speed, and I'm a very kinetic person in terms of filmmaking. I love the movement of film more than anything else. The cinematic quality of it attracts me. I like visual imagery, but I started out in pure film, which is really a kinetic experience. So that's where my focus is. That's why I intend more of a kinship with silent films and more modern film. I like the old cinema. My films are more of a hybrid of a different style of filmmaking to what I call talking head movies. Some people don't get it, especially the more academic types. They're used to a particular kind of movie, and if you bring them something else, they don't understand it. So that's so racing is just a perfect example of that, right? It's perfect excuse for him to just go full on visual storytelling, because one of his first short films he ever made was about racing too, and just getting that sense of speed, that sense of just energy coming from it, just purely visually. Is we've seen how many car chases are there in film, right? Just dozens and dozens and dozens, and he managed to make one that was very unique, which is a very tricky thing to do. So it's pretty it's an impressive piece of filmmaking for sure.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so good. And I remember well, a couple things. Number one, just the tension rising. Again, just the way he tells that between the music, and I love just the anticipation that comes just from just simply showing the racers start their engines, you know.
Yep.
You see the beams come across, you hear the engines, which I think are actual race car sounds, at least the base of a lot of these, right? Like actual race cars for the sounds of the pod racers.
Yeah, I can't remember. I think Sebulba's might be a Porsche with like the engine modified to make a certain sound. But yeah, there's a lot of real world. Originally, Ben Burtt talked about he was going to put in like normal kind of rocket ship sounding sounds for the race cars, and George said, "Nah, I want to go for actually trying putting actual race car sounds or car engine sounds." So there's a lot of other things layered in there, I'm sure, but the other is for sure definitely real car noises in there for sure.
Especially with Anakin's, right? I mean, if you listen to Anakin's and then watch like a NASCAR race, I mean, it's almost identical. I remember hearing that. I was like, wow, that's a pod racer. I was like, there goes Anakin's racer. Yeah, and it fits. It works so well.
Yeah,
so
it doesn't
really
feel
enjoy
like
that.
it doesn't stand out like, oh, that's a car noise, and it works.
Yeah,
you're right. It's weird that it just seems like it shouldn't work, but it does.
Works great. And then you see, you know, again, just that little piece of dialogue between Qui-Gon and Padme. It's the same thing we've been seeing. She's like, "You're out of your mind," you know, and he's like, "You gotta trust me. The Queen trusts me. Remember, Queen, you trust me, right?"
Exactly. Totally like messing with her. He's like, "Well, the Queen trusts me." She's like, "I can't say what I want to say right now." Yeah, it's true.
And I love this. I don't know. I'm assuming George intended this, but she uses the same line that Newt Gunray told her earlier. You know, "You assume too much."
Oh, I never caught that.
Oh, really?
Wow, I never caught that. Yeah, she totally does.
Man. And I always thought that was a nice nod to that, as you kind of see her naivete slowly being peeled back. You know, like you see some past history come up.
Whoa,
where now she's almost taken his role, where you know he's looking down to her, telling her all this stuff, and now she's doing it to Qui-Gon. Yeah, you assume too much. I always thought that was kind of neat. And and then. Cool. Yeah, it's kind of a neat touch. And then just, you know, George always saying that the story rhymes. It's kind of neat. And then just Jar Jar, this is going to be messy. You know, like he's just audibly saying what the audience is feeling. Like, this is going to be intense. Yeah. Oh, and I just love the sound effects. So something I used to do when I I did it often, but when I first got my 5.1 surround sound, like for the first time, back when the first like DVDs came out, I would put on this scene and just crank it, and it was so cool. The sound design, and just, oh my goodness, my props to the sound designers, because it is just so epic. And when you have surround sound and you listen to the sound of these racers, I mean, it just feels like you're there. When you crank it up, it shakes the house, and you just hear them whizzing by. And just the shot of like all the racers lined up, and you see them just kind of revving their engines, and you're just waiting for that countdown. Oh, it's so good. So good. The anticipation. And then, Jabba bites the head off that thing, and starts the race.
And what a great
Yeah.
kickoff to the race. Again, just always casting Anakin in the underdog as the underdog, just putting every obstacle you can in front of him. Oh, his pod won't start.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, it's like the worst possible moment. It's like, no. But you have to. You got to beat your hero up before they win. You know, they gotta go through some obstacles before to make the victory feel worth it. You know, so he literally starts like in last place. Like he doesn't even have a great standing to start off with. And so I just love that beginning where it just starts off on the wrong foot. Him and poor Ben Quadraneros.
Ben Quadraneros, yeah. Yeah, and I like this too. Going back just a hair, is you see Anakin for the first time seem slightly nervous. This is one of the only times we kind of see him like that. You know, he takes this little breath right before Jabba starts the race. He just takes this little breath, like, you know, you just feel that anticipation. True. And and then when his pod doesn't start, like, how many times have we felt that just in life where you're so excited and you're ready and something fails? You know, it's like,
I've had that literally when my car won't start. or times it's like, no, or they blow a tire or something. Like, no, please no. How do I fix this? Yeah, for sure.
And it just shows the absurdity of the situation. You know, like here's this kid racing in this first time pod racer. He hasn't even tested it. Yeah. And I remember, but this is cool, and this is just kind of a nerd in me. I love the shots of Anakin just flipping switches, pushing buttons. It's just so, I've always just loved that scene, and I've mimicked that ever since I saw this. You know, it's just so much fun. Like, I'll still do this every once in a while when the kids and I will pretend that like our minivan's like a gunship, the clone gunship. You know, we'll all jump in and push all the buttons and start those stuff. It's just so cool. And I love the rhythm of that, where it's just like boop, 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 boop. You know, it's all like really timed, and it just shows Anakin's knowledge of it. But it's just such a cool, totally. I don't know, that always resonates with me when it's just kind of like a drum beat almost. It's like perfect rhythm, pushing the buttons. Yeah. So it's just pretty cool.
And it's true. And it shows just how well he deals with the situation, like how competent of a racer he is. And again, as an audience, we hasn't really seen him in action before. You see him fly it like a pro. It's like, oh, he knows exactly what buttons to hit. And he's, you know, every time when his engine, you know, comes loose, as an audience, you're like, well, we're done. Okay, that's it. Game over. But he's just, you know, calm and collected, and he knows exactly what to reach for, what tool to use, and it's just, he's not. Anakin's very kind of like stoic and like focused throughout the whole race. He's not. There's not a lot of him reacting too much. Like he's very, well, as you know, Qui-Gon says, like focused, and he's following his instruction from his master without really realizing it. But it just seeing that it kind of reminds me of the way Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were at the beginning of the movie when they're just taking down the battle droids. They're just kind of very focused and, you know, not really. It's very Jedi-like, and so seeing Anakin in a very similar stressful situation, but also just kind of dealing with it very calmly. Every other pod racer around him is screaming on, making weird noises and freaking out. And Sebulba's, you know, laughing and taunting, and Anakin's he's just locked in, zoned in. It's just like, okay, I see. This kid is kind of reminding me of Qui-Gon, kind of reminding me of Obi-Wan a little bit. So it's just, I love this sequence just for. Yeah, just even pressing the buttons, like you said, is very just the confidence and quickness with which he does it. It's just like, oh yeah, this is all painting a picture.
Yeah, and it just non-verbally shows his knowledge of it. Yeah, it's so cool, and I like that idea of just like him so focused, so in tune with the Force in this moment. Yeah, and it's just so interesting to contrast him to Ben Quadraneros, because Ben is the guy that I would be if my car doesn't start. Just like, you know, just whacking on it. Like, come on, looking around like, what do I do now? That would totally be me, you know, where it's just fun to see Anakin like, I got this, boop, 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 you know, just going in. So do you know, is that why George put Ben in here? Do you know anything as to why, like what the purpose of Ben Quadraneros is?
I know all, you know, just from watching, you can see, again, kind of we've been talking about that contrast between Anakin and all the other pod racers. They're just, you know, they don't react fast enough, so they get blown up, or they're cheating like Sebulba is, or they're, you know, they panic when something isn't working, and just every time Anakin faces one of those situations, he reacts in the correct way and they don't. You know, and you can see him, that one where he gets trapped behind that one racer and just pulls that cool maneuver where it kind of goes like loops around him to get past him, and he's getting shot at by Tusken Raiders and not flinching, and I don't really know anything specifically about why each pod racer was chosen, like to do each action, like why Ben Quadraneros was chosen. I mean, I think it's no secret that he's like really goofy looking, and he's the one who just doesn't look like he's, knows what he's doing, and he looks like a character who's destined to fail in a scene, right? Because he just looks goofy and dumb. But I do know that George picked each pod, he matched each pod to the racer based on their personalities.
That's
like,
cool.
What they would be like. Okay, this looks like a pod racer that Ben Quadraneros would drive. This looks the aggressive one that's going to be more aggressive looking one that's going to be Sebulba's and that kind of thing. Yeah, Matt Wood talked about that when they were figuring out what the pod racers were going to be for each pod was for each racer. But so I don't really know exactly why Ben is the way he is, but I just knew that you can see the contrast of all the different racers and Anakin, and why it's clear he wins because he keeps his head, he stays cool and calm and collected and focused, and he doesn't make dumb decisions, he doesn't cheat, he doesn't react too negatively and all that stuff, he doesn't panic, all that stuff. So that's mostly what I've gotten from it, but I'd have to see if there's something about Ben Quadraneros' role in all this. I don't know.
Yeah. I just always thought it was kind of odd to have two pods stall out at the beginning. Yeah, it's not bad. Not bad at all. I was just curious. It just seemed like an odd choice to me, but yeah.
It's probably just there to show that he doesn't deal with it the right way, and Anakin figures it out, and he smacks his, keeps hitting the dashboard until it blows up. So
yeah. That is a cool point, though, to think of like how each racer reacts so differently within the race. Like Ben, you look at Ben, or you look at Sebulba, or a lot of these guys give into their anger and they get frustrated. Or it's interesting to me just now realizing this. Anakin doesn't get mad in this, which is kind of odd for an Anakin. He never gets mad. He never gets upset. That's you often see Anakin get frustrated, but he doesn't in this. Yeah. He just goes right through it. Like you said, he's just locked in. Huh. Yeah. That's kind of cool.
I think it's because he's in his element, right? Like he says he loves pod racing, and so I think he's at his best. It's kind of like it's him kind of at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. It's when he's being a good Jedi. It's like he's just in his element. He's him during the Clone Wars. Like obviously he has his low points in the Clone Wars, but he's just at his best, and he's doing what he's good at, and he's just in tune with the Force, and he's just and there's very little that can disturb him, that can bother him when he's in that spape, I think. So
that's a good point.
Yeah, and it gets probably the most free he feels. He feels powerful. He feels free in that moment because, again, up till now, we see him get into that darkness when people start putting him down, saying, "Oh, you're a slave. You're trapped. You're less than." And this is an example of him. He's proving everyone wrong. He's the only human who's pod racing. He's a little kid and he's pod racing, and he's racing against the best champions on the hardest track with a sabotage pod racer, an unproven unproven pod, and he's never run a race before, and he's with all those obstacles and that we've talked about, and he's just having the time of his life, and he's doing it to save his friends. He's doing it for a good reason. Like, and he doesn't know it, but he's racing for his freedom. In the end, he's not given freedom as a free gift. He's earned it through this battle essentially that he's going through. Cool. He's bested the society that's brought him down. He beat the odds. He showed them He showed them that they're idiots. He's earned his freedom. And it's similar to like Maximus and Gladiator and Ben-Hur. Actually, he's fighting for slaves. And everyone cheers him on because he's one of them. When the crowd goes crazy, when he's like a local boy, he waves to the crowd because all these poor people who are just trying to get some entertainment to distract them from their horrible lives as slaves or moisture farmers, whatever. At the end, they all crowd around him and lift him up on their shoulders, right? Because his victory is their victory. Like cool. His mom says, "You've brought hope to those who have none." So it's like his victory means a lot to them, and I think it means a lot to him too.
That's so cool. I never even thought about that. Yeah, that's really cool. I love that. That's really neat. Yeah. Wow, that adds the weight to it. And you think about who Anakin is, Clone Wars, Revenge of the Sith, even into the original trilogy, like Yeah, that's a really good point. He loves to be in the action, the front and center. Yeah, always involved. He hates sitting on the sidelines. He doesn't want to sit in the tower and meditate. He wants to be out there. We're moving forward. Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm thinking about back on this. Even in the Death Star trench run, it's very similar feel. I don't know if George intended that, but it seems like it. He's just very focused. He doesn't really give into anger, even though he's full on Darth Vader at that point. He's just, this is my mission. I like being the center of attention, not the center of attention, but in the action. Huh?
Yeah. He's like, I'll take them myself. Cover me. He's getting his hands dirty. He's getting in there. Yeah. Yeah, and it probably has the opposite effect where he gets so obsessed with taking out these X-wings that he doesn't notice this Corellian freighter coming up behind him and getting his wingman and knocking him off course. So yeah, it's true. I never really quite thought about it that way before, but you're right. Like his Darth Vader in the trench run is very much like a darker version of like where Anakin in the Podrace has gone to, but it's still like the same. Different side of the same coin, where like, yeah, he's in his element, but his motivations and his whole attitude about it is of course evil at this point. But,
it feels very similar.
It's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it really seems like the Death Star trench run is like the dark side version of the Podrace. It's very intense, very narrow, very fast, and he's got the same feel, just very focused, very, just into it. Yeah, so that's pretty cool.
This time, yeah.
But he fails. Yeah. And it's fun to see him, like Anakin's son now. Bests him,
It's true.
Yeah.
We got a new Skywalker, new pilot is taking over.
New pod racer. Yeah. That's so cool. I never thought about that until just now.
But like also like that's our first kind of, I never thought about this either, but maybe this isn't quite true, but that's really like our first look at Luke using his Force abilities as well. Like both he and Anakin's Force connection, their connection to the Force is really kind of on display in racing and flying and speed and all that. And it's kind of obvious, but I never really thought about it. We're shown in the movies. Is that right? We've probably seen Luke. We probably see Luke use the Force in some way before that. I'm trying to think.
Before the trench run?
Yeah, I think that's really our first real good look at it. Actually.
Boy, yeah, I don't think we do.
Yeah, and that's our first look at it with Anakin. That's a cool little connection between father and son I never really thought about before. That's really our first look at their abilities. Anyway, it's also very similar to Anakin in the droid control ship at the end of this movie. But
right.
Anyway, but yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, it's so cool. How much character you can tell just through action.
Yeah.
Without any dialogue, just show them what they're capable of, and just how much the audience is won over by the end of this sequence of like, okay, we understand why Qui-Gon had such faith in this kid. We understand, why all this was gonna work. Like this kid clearly is special. We've been told that Qui-Gon can see it, and now we've seen it. He saw it before, he could sense it or whatever, but now we've seen proof of it, and this kid is amazing.
And you're really rooting for him. I mean, you're really sold. Yeah. I remember even as a kid, like being just so sold in by this point. The pod race just solidified it. It's like, yep, he's our hero. We're going for this, Yeah. Just a couple of little Easter eggs. We get our first glimpse of Aura Singh here. Yep. That's kind of neat. Which again, just a credit to George. We're just going to create this character. No dialogue. All she does is stare at this race go by.
Yep. And everyone's like, who is that? Yeah.
Yeah, just the mystery of it. Yeah. And then of course he fleshes her out later in the Clone Wars. But still, this is kind of neat. And then I remember George saying in the behind the scenes that oh my goodness, what's that guy's name? Is it Ord? No, that's the planet. Oh man, the little gangly guy where he's got the pit droids, the three pit droids.
Odie Mandrell, yeah.
Odie Mandrell. I kept thinking Ord Mantell. I was like, that's the planet. That's not
very close. It's funny. I never thought about that. They are very close.
Yeah, how it's an homage to Three Stooges. So,
yeah.
My dad's like a huge Three Stooges fan, and now he's showing it to my kids. So it's just fun to see the little Three Stooges there. Yeah, I like it. It's classic, old school stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, just watching the editing here, just amazing. I mean, these scenes are so quick, and just no storytelling. I mean, no language really. It's just boom, 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 boom. No talking. Little bits, obviously, but so cool, so cool. Just you're just so sucked into this,
Yeah, totally. And from a visual standpoint, the visual effects have held up really well in this scene, and special effects, because there's a lot of it. That people say there's, as we talked about, there's too much CGI in the prequels. I'm pretty sure the only CGI environments in this sequence are like the flat plain and like the kind of rock, the area that's kind of filled with all the cool rock formations. But Beggar's Canyon and that kind of the underground, that kind of weird kind of trench they go through, and of course the stadium. Those are all practical models. And and there's one shot that I've always loved ever since I was a kid. I just always thought it looked super cool and looked real to me. It's actually, we're kind of past it now, but the beginning of the race when they're all revving their engines waiting to start, there's a shot of Sebulba, and you can see like this kind of heat distortion coming off his engines behind him. With the background, and for something about that shot to me was always just like, that just looks so real, looks so good. And I just love the quality of that shot. Ever since I was a kid, I always liked that shot for some reason. It just always stood out to me. I don't know why, but
so good.
But yeah, there's so many good, and so many good, fun little antics happening here and there. It's interesting that it's our first introduction to Tusken Raiders. So in their first scene, their first time we see them, they're trying to shoot a kid. So that's not these guys are obviously bad news. And so we'll remember that, because next movie they're also bad news for Anakin, and next movie in a bigger way, obviously. But that's our first look at him.
That's a good point.
Little sequence there, and I think big disclaimer here. I don't know if this is true. I could be 100% making this up. But I think I remember reading somewhere that kind of their thought for where this whole racetrack came from was that this area, this land they're on, that big arena with the big rock formation, that was kind of where Tusken Raiders were hanging out. Like that was like kind of like a special site to them, a special place. But then they built this, big commercial racetrack there, and they never forgave them for that. They were upset by it, so that's why they're out there taking pot shots at them, whether they're out because they're upset by they're kind of protesting the whole thing. Because it's sort of like, you took our land kind of thing, and you've made it, you've ruined it kind of thing. I could be totally making that up. I think that's in some sort of in like one of the locations book, or in some sort of behind the scenes visual dictionary or something. But I was always wondering, like, why are they shooting them? What's going on there? I think that's at least a reason. I don't know if that's the reason George came up with, but it was a reason that was stated at some point by somebody.
I would not be surprised by it. And it would, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know anything about that, if that's true or not, but it makes sense, because this is such a wild, wild west feel, where it feels like the Tusken Raiders, they're the Native Americans out there shooting at the modern,
totally
modern people out in the west. And, it makes sense to me as to why the Hutts and nobody would bother with them on this racetrack, because it's like adds that much more drama and excitement to it, Good point. Again, that's all speculation, but it's still, you just get this wild, wild west feel. We're out in the middle of the west and out in the dunes. Yeah, it's really cool. And there's the scene that you were talking about with the where Anakin loses control a little bit, where he spins out. So cool. Gets back in, and I just love it. You really get the sense that Anakin again knows what he's doing. He's taking all these shortcuts, and he's just pushing all these buttons and getting right in where you're supposed to be. And just by the second half, or by the second lap, he's already right behind Sebulba. So it's just like, wow, this kid's good. To see him a lap and a half, and he's already right behind the leader when he started way behind. So cool. And I just love the knowledge this kid has of mechanics, and the gearhead he kind of is. So neat. I mean, he's just so calm, pushing all these switches. He knows right what to do. And it's interesting to me too. That just really strikes me. I never really thought about this before. Just, he never gets mad. He never freaks out. He plays by the rules. He's not bumping into people. He's not cheating. Whereas all the other guys, they're smashing into him. They're knocking him out, Sebulba's cheating left and right. That's not Anakin, he's just going at it. So, and it's just, man, the competence of this guy is so cool. Even when he's flying up in the air, he's just pushing the buttons. He's got this, It's so cool. Gets right in front of Sebulba. So good. The
I love
drama of
that
it.
scene where that scene where he does get in front of Sebulba, where Sebulba kind of derails him. He goes off the ramp and then he pulls back in front of him. And just the way it's shot and the way the sound design does a really big deal.
Yes.
Talk about the sound design, but like where it gets quiet and you just hear him go past, and then like he lands right in front of him. Then his engines kick in and you just hear it's Skywalker. And everyone screams. I love that moment. I get hyped every time that moment happens. I get so like, yes, he's finally in first, And it's like that quiet, and just a huge part of that I think is just that sound design, just going quiet for a second, and then boom, it like smacks you with that. The engines of our hero and his pod. He's in first now. I just love that. And just speaking of sound design, there's basically no music in this sequence aside from the fanfare until the very end when Anakin and Sebulba kind of have that last sort of confrontation about who's going to win. And so it's just a great. Instead of a symphony of instruments, we get a symphony of sound effects for this whole sequence, and it's so cool to listen to. Ben Burr was just having a blast, you can tell, and it's just so fun to follow. Just the sound of in the absence of dialogue, right? The gung, gung, gung of Sebulba's pod just tells you everything you need to know. It's like, oh, that's this dangerous animal like grunting or growling is coming, and Anakin's zippy little pod, tiny little underdog. He's got I think am I right in thinking that he has probably the smallest pod of all of them?
Yeah.
Like it's pretty tiny. So even just visually it's just small and underdogish,
Underdog, yeah. And good call with the sound effect. Like even the sound effects, he's got this small sound, and compare that to Sebulba's. Yeah, this. Oh man, yeah. And I remember as a kid, this struck me. There's no music, there's no dialogue. It's just all sound effects, and I loved it. It never took me out of it. It's just like, this is so cool. Yeah, it's so good. Man, and I love the scene. I always have. And I still feel this, just the tension where Anakin looks behind him and Sebulba's engines are right there. Yeah. And you hear the slight change in tone where it kind of shifts you to his perspective, when he's turning back. Because you hear Sebulba's engine, but then he turns back and you hear it a little bit louder. Yeah. Where it's just like, oh man, it just throws you right in the moment. And I remember watching my kids watch this, and they were just on the edge of their seats, I think they were just so hooked. And invested in every single minute of it, and just how much we as people love the underdog story, and we love action, we love sports, we love the competition. Man, it's so good. And again, when Anakin's pod racer starts on fire, more tension, more underdog. He knows exactly what to do. You seem a little nervous though, which is kind of, he's got this like clenched teeth look, and he's trying like, okay, this is a little intense. Yeah. And I love how they do this just so visually. They tell the entire story of how he fixes it without a single word, and I just think that's so cool. Like you understand exactly what's happening, where you see just the little bars come up, like you can see his engine's light flashing, and you see the little energy beams come up and switch over to the next one. It's so cool. It's just such a great way of storytelling, just visual storytelling. Like he doesn't have to be like, oh, I need to switch power to the other engine. It's like, nope, you don't need to know that. You just see it. It's so good. Yeah.
And even if you can't follow like exactly, you don't know like, oh, you don't know what things are called or what piece or what tool he's using, but you get the sense of, visually, like, okay, this thing's broken. He's changing power over to here so that this is now that's even. That the green means good. We're not we don't have red lights flashing. We have green lights. So we're good. It's just very very simple stuff, but so effective, and it doesn't slow. It's so easy to slow down a scene like this with dialogue or or cutting away to like, okay, this is what, or explaining to the audience what's happening, but it keeps you in the moment, but still gives you enough information to follow what's happening without you feeling lost.
And just that's the beauty of movies, right?
Yep.
Just visual. It's all visual, and it's just so masterfully done here. And
this sequence does not work as a book or as a radio drama, or even as great as video games are. Like this is a sequence that can really only be told through the medium of cinema, of movie making. So it's super. Yeah, I think that's probably why George loves it so much. It's just it's one of those things where it's was it Pride and Prejudice? You can tell that as a book, was a book first. It works better as a book probably than as a movie, but you can do it as a movie because you can have dialogue and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, when you don't have dialogue, you don't have, any of those things. What is it that makes movies? Why they're called movies? It's short for moving image. That's why they call them movies. So it's like that's what makes this unique. And so he's really pushing that as far as he can here, and it's a delight to behold. It's awesome.
Yeah, it really is, and I feel like Star Wars is just so made for that. Like it's I'm growing up in the '90s. The X-Wing series was a big deal. It was like 2 big book series in the '90s, like Thrawn and that. And I remember reading the X-Wing series because I love the X-Wings. Like it's one of my favorite parts of Star Wars, just the space ships,
Yeah.
And I remember reading them and it was like, this is so difficult because I want to see it, I want to to slow down and take the moments to describe these. And it's just, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say it didn't work, but it was just kind of like, to describe a dog fight versus just to watch it. I mean, so different. And Star Wars is movies. It is visual. Yeah, it's so good. And same here, at the last race or the last part of the race, again, no dialogue. We see their pods connecting and the drama, the tension of it. Even Kitster's little look of like, ooh, this isn't going to be good. It's so good. You don't need dialogue for it. It's just his mom, kind of closing her eyes like, oh, this is bad, You don't need her mom to be like, oh no, she just that look. Every mom understands that, like, oh.
Yep, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a parent. Like, can you imagine putting your kid in that situation? I mean, your kid,
man,
fly, like almost die like 30 times just to help some strangers you met 2 days ago. It's like, no, sure.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. And you just wonder, again, the stakes are so high. It's like, how is he going to get out of this? They are literally connected. Like, what's he going to do? And just that little boost of the thrusters, I love it. And I love Sebulba's little voodoo,
Yeah, exactly. One bit of dialogue at the very end. And again, that it gets quiet, right? Again, that silence before the contrast. It's so important in filmmaking is contrast. If you want something to be scary, you have, and startling, you have the quiet scene before, things slow down. And if you want something, if a moment needs to feel fast, you have a slow moment before it. And in this case, if you want the roar of a crowd to be loud, then you have a quiet, desert with just one little creature going Podu, and then boom, the music hits and the audience the crowd goes nuts like the announcer says. And it's just so well. It just, again, that moment hits you when you watch it. It's so good.
And again, just the fast-paced editing. I love it. Even just the little scenes. I mean, there's so many quick scenes thrown in there of like the entire audience just looking left. Like how they watch the pod race. Like they're in the second lap. There's like 3 of those where they all just go boom. It's just like, man, that's so cool. Just that little scene. Just keeps them moving so fast. It never slows down. I just love it. You're just so hooked into this. Yeah. Then he wins the race, and then things start slowing down a little bit. Yeah. And I love this scene. Yeah. So this is this Greedo? Do you know, with Kitster? Is that supposed to be Greedo with Kitster?
That's Wald.
Okay.
That's his friend. It was there earlier. Like, you're such a joker, Annie. Like when he says it in tease, but all the kids are kind of going like, "What? You can't get this pod racer running." So he's I guess the one friend besides Kitster who supported Anakin in his pod racing. But Greedo does show up later. The only time we see him is he would have shown up later. He does show up in a deleted scene. But
the deleted scene.
Wald. This is Warwick Davis.
Oh, okay.
And which is funny because he plays 2 characters in the scene. He plays a friend of Watto and a friend of Kitster. So he watches the race as 2 different characters. But yeah.
I like that, and I bring that up because at the very end of the race, you see what'd you say is Wald? Is that his name? Mm-hmm. You see him going crazy and dancing, and Kitster, they're kind of dancing, and then like Wald goes up to give Kitster 2 high fives, and Kitster gets this. I think it was the actors. I don't think that was scripted. Where like Kitster's like, "What am I supposed to do right now?" And he kind of.
Oh really? I never noticed that.
He kind of misses the air high fives.
Oh.
And I've always really liked that. I think because like looking at it, it seems like it was just like the actor didn't know what to do, and he just was like, "Oops, I think I missed it." But I like how George kept it in there because it's just a normal like awkward kid moment.
Yeah.
It's just really good. Yeah, and I've always just kind of thought that was funny, but and then C3PO. Yeah, but I like that. I never realized that before. How the crowd goes so nuts for him. I never realized that, just how, like what you said, where there's just hope for these guys. I never thought that. I always kind of thought it was weird that the crowd cheered for him so much because everybody loves Saboba, So I just think that's really cool. It changes my perspective of this. Like, oh, this is why the crowd just gets so excited. He's the underdog. Here's their local guy. He's the slave boy. Yeah, that's really neat.
And I don't know if this is true or not, but I used to think that, all the Podracers were just from Tatooine, but it's really like, no, it says Anakin's a local boy. And I think Saboba's probably just in town for the race. I was wondering, like, does Saboba live in Tatooine? I think he's probably just there. They see him in the streets probably because he's there the week of the race getting ready or something. So maybe he doesn't spend, maybe he's because he's from, dang it, where is he from?
Is it Malastare?
Pixeletto.
Oh,
how do you say it?
Yeah.
Because that one announcer goes, la Pixelito, Saboba. I remember that.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure is some kind of the name is a play on words where it has having to do with pixels with CGI or something. Anyway, so maybe he spent most of his time there. I just never really thought about that. Maybe he just because I always just assume as a kid it's like, oh, it's Tatooine, that's where Saboba is, But yeah, Anakin is the one like Tatooine. He's a human, so most of those people in the crowd are humans, and most of them are probably very, very poor, and they don't have box seats like Jabba and Watto. It's like that's true. Like, the people in Watto's box are very upset when Anakin wins, because they probably have money that they're spending on or betting on the better racers or quote unquote better racers like Sebulba, but everyone else, he's one of them. He's a local boy, and he's a slave, and he's the underdog. He's fighting. He's a victory. It's a victory for them. Did you ever see Cinderella Man?
No, I didn't. Ironically,
great story.
I've heard it's fantastic.
Based on a true story.
Yeah.
Great. Based on a true story, but basically, during the Depression, there was a guy who used to be a really, really great boxer, but the Depression hit him along with everyone else, and so he wasn't doing well, and he had really tough times. But he finally started working his way back, working his way up from nothing really to the top and becoming a champion. And so it's kind of like Rocky in that sense, but it was, during the Depression, he was kind of this symbol of hope for people who had lost their jobs, who couldn't feed their families, and times were tough, that he was sort of he was one of them, who gave them hope. Like he made it. And so they gave them hope that they could do it too. So to me, I kind of think of that kind of vibe when Anakin is racing here, when he wins, when he waves to the crowd and they cheer for him at the beginning, and when they raise him up on their shoulders at the end. It's like really, it's a big, very personal thing probably for those people in Tatooine. And of course, and like I said, Shmi voices it when she says, "You have brought hope to those who have none." That a slave could do this. And it's, again, that's very much a theme of Ben-Hur as well. That very similar situation happens where everyone's kind of surprised, like, "Oh, you're supporting this slave? Okay." I think it's Pontius Pilate is like, "Well, okay, people like him, so he wins."
Yeah, that's cool. I never pictured that before. I never picked that up. But it makes sense. Yeah. So this is a small detail I've always appreciated, how they put dust all over Anakin's face, except for where his goggles were.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always appreciate that, and they make him look sweaty. I just think that's kind of a neat touch. And then, there at the very end, when Padme and his mom both give him hugs, I just think they do a nice touch, because Anakin's like kind of excited that Padme gives him a hug, but annoyed that his mom gives him a hug.
Yep.
And you hear him going, like, "Mom, stop it." Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
It's a nice touch. Yeah. We can all relate to that. "Mom, stop."
Yeah.
Not in front of the girls.
Exactly. Yeah. And backing up a bit, I did forget to mention it, but we do get him, his celebration along at the end where he's kind of like focused, and he does, like you said, he does grit his teeth. He does react to things that are happening in the race, but he doesn't like panic or anything. But once he wins, he goes like, "Mom, I did it." He's like, "Yeah," and he gives a little victory yell, and it's like he really does. Yeah, you can tell he's happy and he's having the time of his life there and really getting into it. So even though he was focused before, now he really lets loose and celebrates along with everyone else. Yeah, just real quickly, just to show that kind of that break in his or that change in his focus, his attitude, is just back to that kind of easygoing kid, like, oh yeah, like sure, yeah, Kisser's right, sure, I'll do it. Like I'm like when Qui-Gon puts him in the pod, whoa, that kind of, he's back to being a kid again. But during that race, he's like, in that race, he's kind of a Jedi. He's kind of focused. He's kind of really getting into it. But anyway, sorry. Back to the scene where he in the hangar and Padme and you can see Padme kind of like, what does she say? Did she say we owe everything to you? What did she say?
Yeah, we owe you everything. Yeah.
Yeah, where she can kind of see Padme's like, oh, and that's true. We haven't really talked about Padme during the whole race. Like she, and she's like, look, here he comes. Like you can kind of see her sort of like at first, like what's going on here, and then she kind of is seeing what's happening. Like, wow, this kid's actually making it. And again, it's all in her face. And then by the time you get to hear, like she's smiling at him, she's hasn't been that happy to see him since she first met him. Hasn't smiled at him that much. It's like, okay, so she knows what this means, more than he does. She knows what was at stake and how that's finally done, and they can sleep soundly, so they think. They don't know about the Sith yet, but it's just cool seeing her again. This is a bit of a story within a story, film within a film. This pod race sequence, and seeing her arc just within the beginning of the pod race to the end is just cool. Like now she's all. Her jaws in a gape. She isn't looking at Obi-Wan or looking at Qui-Gon with that crazy stare anymore. Now she's going like, actually, we owe everything to this little kid, and I was wrong. I really underestimated him.
Yeah, that's a good point. To see her growth and learning her to come out of that naive, be more adventurous, be more risk-taking, maybe. She's not so glued.
Yeah, not being afraid to do what is necessary. Like that was their only option. And so not just leaning into that, and doing what's necessary. And even though it's may not be what she would have liked, it did work out and she trusted it. And she ends up doing that later. That's how the movie ends. So
it's her turn to do something radical.
Yeah, she has to become Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon's unintentional apprentice is Padme. No, not very intentional on his part, but unintentional on her part.
Yeah. Great. Well, what about the scene with Qui-Gon and with Watto? And then I should probably head out, but where he's collecting.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that one?
It's just I like that both Qui-Gon and Watto are they both engaged in the same behavior. They're both gamble. They both, bet on the race, and but you can see where they put their faith in, or what they, what their motivations were. And like Watto clearly loses, and he should lose because of how he's keeping Anakin as a slave. So he's obviously a bad. Again, it's the meeting of the two father figures, right? Like the bad, faulty father figure that Watto is. And the good one that Anakin deserves, which is Qui-Gon. And just seeing how, just even though they both gamble, they both bet, Qui-Gon did it wisely, did it for the right reasons, and Watto was doing it selfishly. And it's just one of those classic Star Wars moments where two characters kind of are in the same situation, and one makes the right decision and one doesn't. And and as Qui-Gon says, if you, what does he say? If you, the longer you gamble, eventually you lose. Or what he said, what he says. If you gamble, my friend, eventually you'll lose. And Watto kind of like not accepting it, And Qui-Gon, oh, we could bring the Hutts into this, and he's like, no, I don't want to deal with that. Take him. Also, I forgot. Speaking of Hutts, I just love the Jabba the Hutt fell asleep.
Oh yeah,
the whole
he's totally asleep.
Just a fun little. Yeah.
What a good character moment. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he didn't care what's happening. He didn't care that.
He's just doing his duties.
Yeah, he's just like, I just have to. They make me do these things, but yeah. So yeah, it was just a good little defeat of Watto. Just okay, this guy's nasty. He needs to go away, and this is Qui-Gon stepping into the, getting Anakin from Watto, taking the reins, becoming the good father that Anakin needs. And also the Sith probe shows up. So.
Yes, I was going to ask about that because I'm pretty sure that was very intentional, right? That wasn't just a fill in the background. It was like, no, there it is. Yeah, yeah.
That makes sense that it's Qui-Gon because he was, they know what the Jedi look like.
That's a good point.
Probably, there's not a crowd. I think it is in the scene actually. You see that Rats Terrell's family rocking in the background while they're crying. She's like, his wife's crying or something because he died.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on in the background of this scene, but yeah.
Yeah. Which again, George is so good at. He's so good about that background stuff. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. There's always something happening in the background. Yeah. I always noticed that too. Even as a kid, I was like, hey, there's that guy's family. Yeah. I thought it was an interesting touch that he put the probe in the background, but it's really quick. You hear the noise. So it's intentional, but there's no attention really drawn to it. It's almost like you have to pay attention to see it. It's not like he pauses and shows it finding him and then moves on, or something like that. I just thought that was an interesting move on his part.
And I think part of it was probably motivated by the fact that he originally had that scene later where the probe catches up with Qui-Gon and Anakin, and Qui-Gon, cuts it in half, and they look at it and they talk about what that means and what's going on. So he probably was intending that was going to be the final full reveal of in case you missed it in that scene. It has found them there, and that's why they're they start running to the ship in the next scene. But but since they lost that scene, it is much more subtle now. But we've watched this movie a million times, so I'm sure we notice it, but maybe on your first viewing you don't. But the sound you can hear it too. The sound effect of it is there as well, so it's not entirely. And it's one of those things where I never got to see this in theaters, and so I don't know, what would be obvious to someone on because there's certain things on a huge screen with a good sound system that are way more obvious to you. Yeah. Like I've watched movies every time I try to watch a movie that I've seen before in a theater that I never had before, because you just notice it's just a totally different experience. You just notice things that you never noticed before, and hear things, and you feel different. And so I'm wondering what it'd be like to watch this movie on a big screen. What would I notice? What would I see there that I've never seen before? And how would I feel? How much more would the music affect me? How much more would the images just hit me? So maybe someone watching this for the first time, even though it is kind of subtle for us watching on our phone or our TV, maybe they would notice it. The probe droid. Maybe they'd be super obvious. I don't know. But
yeah, I agree. Yeah, the movie theater is so different. It's so different. Yeah, totally.
All right, that's it for this episode. Join us in the next one as we continue our series on the Phantom Menace. As always, thanks for listening, and on to the next one.